Near-Death Experience by Cassandra A. Taken from the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation.org. I went into this psychedelic journey, as I had the many other journeys I always have, with a sense of incredible responsibility, respect, intention and oversight. I started using mushrooms and MDMA as a medicinal tool for my CPTSD a few years prior to this experience. There was never an air of recklessness, haste or foolish partying. I sourced my medicine from trusted, tested people. On the day my NDE happened, I had set up my room to support the journey. I had all my supplements, water, noise-cancelling headphones, eye mask, maps playlist, and etc. Mushrooms are not a drug where you wake up naked in the road wondering how you got there. While I do hallucinate, I have the self-awareness to know that I am hallucinating, and the great privilege of enjoying it during the experience. I took the mushrooms and did take a somewhat higher dose than normal, but I was prepared to go deeper than ever before. I went into this trip with the intention of diving into my mother trauma. I was born on drugs and alcohol to a very young mother who didn't want me. I wasn't physically held much the first 6 months, and had failure to thrive syndrome amongst other issues. I was adopted at age 6 months, and the mother-daughter relationship wasn't much better. The mushroom trip gave me a beautiful vision of billions of women throughout all of time going through this funnel of abuse that so many of us suffer. We are products of our parents who are products of their parents, and the generational abuse and trauma extends millennia. I felt empathy and compassion for the women in my life that I hated and resented. When I take mushrooms, it's somewhat of a roller coaster, or maybe better, a book chapter. There are waves, depths I go in and out of. Sometimes I'm very aware of the world around me, and other times I'm diving into a vision or hallucination. I can recall every journey I've been on. For me, they transition beautifully and gently. While I was feeling empathy, compassion, and hallucinating this funnel of women throughout history, I suddenly felt myself abruptly leaving my body. Even so, it still was gentle. I understood what was happening, although I'd never personally felt or experienced leaving my body before during a journey. I was very confused. It felt like I was unwillingly pulled from the gentle roller coaster I was on. I believe this is where I stopped breathing, although I did not realise I wasn't breathing at all. I floated out of my body, wondering where I would end up and why I was there. I floated to an incredible room. I use the word room for lack of a better word because there were no boundaries or defined walls. I was just infinitely there. In this room I felt love and peace like I'd never felt before. Everything was the most beautiful golden light. I knew many people who were with me, despite the fact that they didn't have faces, but they did have auras. I could feel their presence and could absolutely feel their love. I greeted them and looked around in awe. I knew they were the spirit guides of the universe, and I know they created it. All of a sudden, I was angry because I felt like I had no choice being there. Then, I remembered feeling surprised but also empowered as I started lecturing these spirit guides. Funny, in hindsight really. I told them it was truly unfair to bring me into a world and subject me to such pain and trauma. I told them that I was just suddenly here and had to survive what felt like endless abuse. The spirit guides were never angry, they simply held space for me and agreed with me. Although this confused me a bit. I felt exasperated at the end of my rant, expecting some explanation. Instead, they told me they understood and I could stay with them if I wanted to do so. Of course, I enthusiastically agreed to stay. I was in endless light, love and peace that I felt so much that it was as if I could explode. They said great, but they did need to let me know what would happen if I died. In that moment, a million moments happened in seconds. I was suddenly in the fetal position with a massive sphere like a tornado all around me, full of the people in my life who loved and needed me the most. I saw my funeral, I saw their grief. I saw my husband finding my body in his pain. I saw the life of my daughter who would never get to be here. And while this tornado was circling around me, it was showing me vision after vision. I looked up through it all to the guides and told them I could not stay. In that moment, I was violently thrust back into my body. When it had felt like life was in slow motion, suddenly life was going 10 million miles an hour. Back into my body, and back into reality. I immediately pushed up off my stomach on my arms and took a massive breath. One of the things with mushrooms, I can't really sober up. I started this journey on my back with no recollection of turning over onto my stomach. When I pushed up on my arms and off my stomach, I knew I'd messed up. I felt sober, which is not normal, and then immediately called my husband. I could see clearly, which is another thing that's not really possible on mushrooms. I told him I was okay, but I could not find my heartbeat. My entire body was blue. I asked him to come home. I rubbed my body vigorously and apologised profusely for what I had done. I didn't want to die. It was a terrifying feeling knowing I'd really put myself in danger. My husband came home and struggled to find my heartbeat as well. After a while, he eventually found a faint heartbeat which was abnormal for me. I have a very strong heartbeat, easily found in many areas. After about 20 minutes, I felt safe, and then my mushroom journey resumed. This was unexpected and odd though. Unfortunately, it was incredibly rough and painful. There were no gentle hallucinations and feelings of love and beauty. Everything was cold, clinical, and massively pixelated. It was as if the world was glitching in a very seizure-inducing way. I couldn't close my eyes, but I couldn't open them either. I've never had a journey like that, and it was a brutal few hours afterwards. I spent the next couple of weeks with severe body aches. I was exhausted and drained despite supplements and attentive self-care. The only thing I was able to figure out was that I had turned over at some point and ended up in a crevice of the air mattress where I was unable to breathe. Or maybe I was rebreathing air. I like my air mattresses half inflated, so there was lots of give. Regardless, somehow, my body had stopped getting the oxygen it needed, which started my NDE. I was not on a massive dose of mushrooms, so it's interesting that I did not notice there was an issue. I still had the ability to assess danger while under the influence, even if it is dulled. I do not regret this, and have since taken the mushrooms many times, although never alone. I am incredibly grateful for my experience. In a way, I gave the universe and myself the consent to be in my body. This is something I felt I never had the chance to give before. NDE elements. At the time of your experience, was there an associated life-threatening event? Yes, psychedelic use. Stop breathing. Life-threatening event, but not clinical death. Stop breathing for more than a few minutes. How do you consider the content of your experience? Entirely pleasant. Did you feel separated from your body? No, I clearly left my body and existed outside of it. How did your highest level of consciousness and alertness during the experience compare to your normal everyday consciousness and alertness? Normal consciousness and alertness? Hard to say. I was obviously under the influence, but was still very aware of what was going on. At what time during the experience were you at your highest level of consciousness and alertness? I felt very aware of what was happening the entire time. Were your thoughts speeded up? Yes, incredibly fast. Did time seem to speed up or slow down? Everything seemed to be happening at once, or time stopped or lost all meaning. There were moments when time was very slow. Then when I told the spirit guides I wanted to stay there, they showed me what would happen if I died. And that was very fast, with so many scenes happening in what felt like seconds. Were your senses more vivid than usual? Incredibly more vivid. Please compare your vision during the experience to your everyday vision that you had immediately prior to the time of the experience. That is a very difficult question. I'm struggling with answering this. Please compare your hearing during the experience to your everyday hearing that you had immediately prior to the time of the experience. Well, I was listening to a playlist the entire time. I do not remember hearing the music once I left my body. Did you seem to be aware of things going on elsewhere? No. Did you pass into or through a tunnel? Uncertain. I remember floating and then being in the room, but cannot remember any sort of definitive tunnel. I do remember feeling like I was travelling somewhere though. Did you see any beings in your experience? Yes, I actually saw them. Did you encounter or become aware of any deceased or alive beings? No. Did you see or feel surrounded by a brilliant light? A light clearly of mystical or otherworldly origin was present. Did you see an unearthly light? Yes. Did you seem to enter some unearthly world? Yes, it was a clearly mystical or unearthly realm I was in. I entered a room full of light and love. It felt like it went upwards versus outwards, but there was golden light all around and floating strings of gold in the fabric of the universe. What emotions did you feel during the experience? Immense love, light, and peace. Did you have a feeling of peace or pleasantness? I felt both incredible peace and pleasantness. What about a feeling of joy? Incredible joy as well. Did you feel a sense of harmony or unity with the universe? I felt united or one with the world. Did you suddenly seem to understand everything? Yes, I understood everything about the universe. I felt that I gave consent to be here now, but I also felt like I knew what I saw had been there all along. I also felt very deeply like I wandered into a place I wasn't really supposed to be. When I arrived, it was almost like a, hey, what's she doing here sort of feeling. What about scenes from your past? Did any of them come back to you? Nah, I recalled painful points of my childhood while ranting to the spirit guides. Did scenes from the future come to you? Scenes from my personal future. I saw my death, my husband finding me, I saw my funeral, my loved ones mourning me. I saw so many people who depend on me, who I help, who I love, all feeling grief and pain from my death. I felt immense shame for dying while on drugs. This would be something that would define my existence in a negative light versus who I was, the good I did. I saw my daughter's life that she would never get to have. She's not here yet. I felt everyone's grief. Did you come to a border or a point of no return? I came to a definite conscious decision to return to life. The spirit guides gave me the choice to stay, and initially I agreed, happily. But then they showed me my death and what would happen. When I looked past those visions of what would happen and I looked back to the spirit guides, I told them I can't stay. There was no response from them. In an instant, a million miles an hour back to my body, in a very chaotic way. God, spirituality, and religion. So what was your religion prior to your experience? Unaffiliated, atheist. Have your religious practices changed since your experience? No. What is your religion now? Other or several faiths of pantheism, Wicca. Did your experience include features consistent with your earthly beliefs? Well, I already had a belief in love and energy, Mother Earth, etc. In a way, the spirit guides I met were not surprising at all. More of a, well, it's great to finally meet you. Did you have a change in your values and beliefs because of your experience? No. Did you seem to encounter a mystical being or presence, or hear an unidentifiable voice? Well, I encountered a definite being, or a voice clearly of mystical or unearthly origin I met, what I would call the spirit guides or makers of the universe. They didn't have faces, but I felt very clearly their presence. I knew there were multiple ones and could look and see them all, although they didn't have a human form per se. Did you see deceased or religious spirits? I actually saw them. Did you encounter or become aware of any beings who previously lived on Earth who are described by name in religions, for example Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, etc.? No. During your experience, did you gain information about universal connection or oneness? Yes, and I always feel this way on mushrooms and sober as well. During your experience, did you gain information about the existence of God? Yes, I met the spirit guides of the universe. I never met a patriarchal god or single being, but instead many beings. They felt very maternal in nature. Concerning our earthly lives other than religion. During your experience, did you gain special knowledge or information about your purpose? Yes, I felt like I had way too much love and goodness to give to the world to have to cut it so short. During your experience, did you gain information about an afterlife? Yes, it just felt like this was what happens when I die. I get to go to this lovely place and exist there with them, purely in love. During the experience, did you gain information about life's difficulties, challenges, and hardships? Yeah, I think the whole trip of me going to the spirit guides was addressing this whole concept of consent. I felt resentment for being born and having to suffer, and in a way, that acknowledged that suffering with complete empathy and compassion and gave me what felt like a choice for the first time. During your experience, did you gain information about love? Yes, I felt it in its purest form. I was it, and I was in it, and it was me. What life changes occurred in your life after the experience? Moderate changes in my life. I feel the experience just validated the beliefs I already had. I am still afraid of dying, but I'm afraid of my life being cut too short, not being able to have kids, not living a full life. I do not fear the act of dying, as I know I'll be met with so much love. Have your relationships changed specifically because of your experience? Yes, every medicine journey I embark on deepens my relationships because I open my heart up to more and more love each time. After the NDE. How accurately do you remember the experience in comparison to other life events that occurred around the time of the experience? I remember the experience more accurately than other life events that occurred around the time of the experience, and I remember the experience in perfect full detail. I have a spotty memory, but this is something I can recall vividly. Have you ever shared this experience with others? Yes, I shared it with many people in the immediate time after. I shared with a Cambo guide and friend who told me her spirit guides told her that I'd stopped breathing for 7 minutes. A lot of people thought it was very profound, but terrifying that it could have ended so badly. Did you have any knowledge of near-death experiences prior to yours? Uncertain. I'd heard it was a thing that existed, but hadn't really read anyone's experiences in depth before. What did you believe about the reality of your experience shortly, as in days to weeks after it happened? I can tell you the experience was definitely real. There was no question as to the reality of what I went through. What did you believe about the reality of your experience shortly, as in days to weeks after it happened? Well, I can say the experience was definitely real. There was no question as to the reality of what I went through at all.